Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. So welcome to today's conversation. We're talking to Kate Schreiber. She's going to give us some background on a horse that I was recently at a dissection with her that she owned that has equine complex vertebral malformation, and so she's going to share her experiences with us. Kate has a strong background in rehabilitation and also teaches first aid courses to people, and she'll give us a bit more of an insight to her background in a second. How are you today, Sophie?
I'm good. I think this conversation is valuable for anybody who's on an ECVM journey themselves, if they're suspect about any of the horses that they own, or if they're body workers for, or they're trainers for, or anyone who just wants some more insight into the realities of ECVM horses for industry knowledge and also awareness, because it's something that is becoming more prevalent with breeding and, in lots of thoroughbreds, warm bloods, lots of horses that we use. So, yeah, it'll be good to know a bit more about Bronson's story.
If you'd like to just give us a bit of an introduction of yourself and Bronson.
Okay, well, thank you for having me today. I am a very long-term follower. I'm a horse trainer. I give lessons. I teach equine first aid courses as part of my business, KS Equestrian. I have a lot of clients with recurring issues that I actually direct them to your podcast instead of having to continually explain the same thing. So especially the roachback episode, that's really popular, I find at the moment, and people just have a bit of a lack of understanding, which it's great to have the resource to refer them through to. So Bronson, I met as a 3-year-old. He was just being broken in. He was actually on his first ride off the property when I met him, and he was a beautiful horse. He just had a presence about him that continued right through to the very end. I purchased him as a 4-year-old. So he'd had done some shows, but unsuccessfully under saddle before I got him. He had all through his life some behavioural quirks that made it quite hard to manage him safely for most owners. But we all love a challenge in the horse world, so of course I took him on board and thought that I could improve things for him, and he could go on to become a successful show horse for me, which he did, but it was just a little more eventful than I would have liked.
So when you say you had some behavioural quirks early on, what were they?
So his original breeder, she bred him to be her last horse. She was convinced that he just disliked her. So his favourite trick before he came to me was he liked to pull ponytails. So he would bite her by the hair, and he did that to the second owner as well. He could be quite mouthy, so not always aggressively biting, but nippy. He always presented quite stallion-like, so I would always get asked if he was there for the colt class. He looked like a stallion. Mares believed he was a stallion. He just had that real presence about him. And he was a big, imposing horse, so he knew how to push his weight around. When I had him, if I would go away, often the girls that were looking after the horses for me would ring in tears saying they couldn't get his rug on or whatever they couldn't do, and they would say, how do we rug him? And he let me rug him. We had a really good relationship most of the time. So yeah, my suggestion was always to try to bribe him with some licorice. But if he didn't like you, you were not a part of his life. He could be quite aggressive, and he'd had a couple of owners before that. When he wanted to get one particular lady off, he would just run her into a tree and she would fall off, and he would run the 5 kilometres home and leave her behind in the bush. He'd run her out of the ring in the show ring when he'd had enough. He definitely backed himself behavioural wise. So the original breeder, she just said, I love this horse, he's everything I wanted, but I just believe he doesn't like me, he just needs to move on. And that's how he ended up with the next owner.
I think that's a really important point then, because we often anthropomorphise horses and, say, well, the horse doesn't like me, or the horse likes this or dislikes that, and we have to be really careful with any behaviours, and obviously that's a big thing that I talk about, the connection between behaviour and physical, that we talk about, between behaviour and physical balance. And when we say the horse doesn't like us or something along those lines, we really need to consider like what could be going on for the horse, like whether it's maybe they don't like us, but maybe it's a position that we put the body in that creates some instability or discomfort, or something that they're feeling that they don't feel comfortable with. And unfortunately, like, I've heard of a lot of ECVM horses where they run people into things like walls and trees and
Yes.
That sort of behaviour. So that's actually a behaviour that these horses can have when being ridden as well.
Yeah, and I mean, he was a happy horse for the majority of the time. Obviously, I wouldn't have continued if he wasn't. But when that switch flicked, he was could be a very aggressive horse. But yeah, he had troubles running with other horses. He was quite aggressive with other horses, so it wasn't just human traits. I put him in one time with a 17-3 hands high warm blood that I had, and when I came back at the end of the day, every inch of that horse's body had been bitten. So he had troubles assimilating in with other horses in herds, essentially. As he got older, he did get better at that, but he hadn't had a lot of opportunities as a young horse because he was quite dangerous with other horses. So being that they're show horses, they get segmented. So that was part of what I tried to do, was give him some friends and teach him how to interact with others without being so aggressive.
What did it look like in terms of a progression? You've got him at 4. How long did it take before you discovered the ECVM?
So when he turned 10, there was a clear downhill progression. And odd things started to happen. Like, he'd always had some behaviours that were, high maintenance to manage, but then things started, like, he was a great horse to float and he travelled all over the countryside as a competition horse. And one day I was floating him and he started scrambling in the float, and I opened the back, and the fear in that horse's eyes was completely unreasonable for the level of travel that he had made. He was absolutely terrified, and that was very close to the end. And to me, that was really odd behaviour, because he was one of my best travellers, and I will never forget the moment of opening that door and the way that his eyes looked. He was petrified, and that only happened once. But to me, that was a sign. That was around the same time that I had a great canter. He could do canter pirouettes, he had canter half passes, his flying changes were great, and then all of a sudden we couldn't even canter a circle. It's like he just could not figure out how to get his legs together to travel on a round shape. So he always had those characteristics on the lunge. He never successfully cantered on the lunge, but he was quite explosive, so it was hard to tell if he was attempting to canter or he was exploding at the time anyway. But if he did canter, he would be disunited behind on the lunge, but that was never a problem under saddle until after the age of 10.
Yeah, and that also can be a challenge for people, when horses have these explosive behaviours of whether something physically is happening for them or whether they're just full of themselves on the lunge. It can be a very difficult thing for people to discern. And being able to recognise that something has changed is a valuable skill for people to have, and knowing what's normal for your horse. When you talk about you said some other high maintenance behaviours.
He had a long history of ulcer problems. So even if he'd had a 12-month spell from an injury, he would still scope a grade 4 ulcer. He had a lot of pyloric ulcers. He was part of clinical trials which were never successful to try to overcome his ulcers and educate the vets. And now looking back, I get a lot of clients obviously ask me about ulcers, and everyone's really fixated on the whole feed them more roughage, it's management. And what I say to them now is is there a pain factor that's causing the ulcers? And yes, we can manage them better, absolutely. But is it coming from a root cause that you haven't found yet? And for him, the ulcers were never resolved, and on dissection, though, it was really evident as to the damage that they had done to his stomach. But I could not have improved. He had friends, he had 25 acres, he had grass up to his knees, and he's still a grade 4 ulcers, but he looks amazing, he's holding condition, all the things. The other pain indicator that was always there was he always was chomping on the bit, and I had a good vet friend, and she always said, there's pain somewhere. They're not mouthy like that unless there's pain coming from somewhere. And he had a bit in the end that he tolerated quite well, but before that point, that was always a real struggle to get him happy in the contact, which there's a few other things happening there on dissection, but really big trigger, hindsight looking, going, well, how come this horse never settled in his mouth?
That's a really important thing to be aware of, because sometimes it's an accepted behaviour, or people put on a noseband to stop that from happening, as opposed to asking the question, why is this actually happening with this horse?
Yeah. And I mean, just little things. When you look back, it's really easy to see things were off, right? But at the time, you're so consumed with getting through the next problem. Like, he hated being groomed. He could not. It was like his skin would crawl when he was younger, and you would groom him. And even to the end, when you'd hose him, he would be reaching for his shoulders and trying to grab at the water. Like, it gave him. He had weird sensation things through his body. But almost like a very jumbled up nervous system that he did not get pleasure from. He would never mutual groom with another horse. That was not something that he ever wanted to take part on. In his whole life, I saw it one time happen where another horse initiated, and he allowed that to continue. But that is the only time I ever saw him mutual grooming with another horse.
Yeah. What are some other, where else did you see strange skin sensitivity or sensations, things that were triggering for him or stood out? Would you have any issues with saddling or girthing?
Yeah, so the rugging obviously was a trigger when I would go away and other girls would rug him. That agitated him, that around his shoulder touching for the rugging. He hated with a passion a sheepskin girth. I did try a sheepskin girth a couple of times, and he very violently reacted to that. He could not stand the feeling of a sheepskin girth on his skin. So that's probably the main areas where that sort of thing popped up.
What about, you mentioned before we came on about his ability to be an ideal first aid demonstrating horse. Can you explain why that was the case? Most
people know Bronson as the demo horse for my equine first aid clinics, and he filled that role beautifully, because I always explain to people, ethically I felt okay about using him because he would always fail tests for running a sharp plastic objects from his ears to his tail. You could run it down as hard as you wanted to, and there was no pain reflex, no response whatsoever. He was completely oblivious to it. So over the years, he did a lot of clinics, and at every clinic, probably around 14 people would practice their intramuscular injections into his neck, and everyone would have a go at his rump, and there was no pain response, just, needle into rump, horse standing there oblivious. People felt really comfortable being able to use him because he wasn't in pain for their learning purposes. But he knew the drill. By the time we'd done a fair few, if someone came in and was nervous, he would start to play the part as soon as they would walk in. And I would say to them, "Are you feeling nervous about this?" And they would say, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to vomit. Like, I'm so worried about this injection thing." And he just knew their body language and their energy. And he took a lot of pleasure in making a fool of them.
But then I'll tell you how to be better.
Yeah, we made light of it, but he definitely told me the people that were anxious about it. Even if I couldn't pick it, he could always pick it, and then we'd have a laugh and they'd come in with a different attitude and he would stand there absolutely fine. But yeah, very clever horse, could read a room.
I'm wondering about the
sensitivity.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, at the end, before the dissection, we did do some testing with a needle on his legs, and he was like hypersensitive about his legs being touched with the needle. He knew exactly the moment I would lightly touch him with the needle and would respond, not violently, but just like, "Why are you doing that? Why are you touching me?" But anything above leg level, completely could not care less, which is
quite a profound response. Truly, I mean, that's a really big deal to lose sensitivity in a part of your body. Anybody who's experienced nerve issues or numbness, I mean, just have that in the ends of my hands every now and then if I'm not watching how I'm using my arms, and to feel that through your whole bit, it's quite a profound thing to be managing in yourself. It sounds like he was sensitive to the people around him anyway, but you said there sounds like a 6-year timeline between the age of 4 and 10, that you've been able to take him places and he's been dealing with different sensations in his body. I'm curious, you said that he had, even after a year off for an injury, that, I'm just wondering, did he have a history of injuries or things that popped up for him during the 6 years that you had him?
He's my house mortgage walking around in a paddock, he was. He had a lot of injuries, but the interesting thing was he never injured the same thing twice. He always had something different, and I always took him to he had really good veterinary care, and every time I'd take him, he would rehab and he would be fine again. And then it got towards the end, and the head vet who I'd dealt with all along, he started to say, "Kate, like, if this happens again, we've got to pick a point where we just call it on this." And I said to him, "But it's just accidents. Like, it's not the same thing. It's just an accident." He said, "Yeah, but normal horses, they don't have accidents like this horse has. Like, they know where their legs are. These things don't happen." So that was sort of at the beginning of the end, essentially, going, And now I have a young horse coming through, and I barely ever use boots, whereas Bronson had boots for everything. And it's, you get caught in the fog, and now I look and go, actually, horses are really good at knowing where their legs are, and they can get out of trouble and they can get in sticky spots and still save themselves. But again, that was, I was seeing him all the time, and it just became normal that I had to put boots on, and probably tried to project that onto others who were looking at me going, "Well, I don't need to put boots on my horse for that. Like, my horse is fine in the float." Whereas Bronson, he would, he'd clip himself on his coronet bands if you floated him without bell boots and things on. So it just became my normal, I guess.
I think also there you highlight that the fact that you're your best advocate for your individual horse. Like, you can get caught up in the fog of thinking that every other horse is like your horse, and so, telling everyone how to look after their horse based on your horse. But the flip side of that is that your horse. So, you knew that he had to wear bell boots, you knew his quirks, and you got to know, what was difficult for him, what was easier for him, what was him kind of saying he was uncomfortable, and all of those things. And I think sometimes people feel very alone in that space where they feel like, their horses are doing strange things, but nobody is listening to them. And obviously you said you had really good veterinary support. And so maybe, I'm not sure, did you have to navigate that where you had to advocate for him at any
Well,
stage?
I remember, so at first I owned him in a partnership with the other lady who loved him and appreciated that he was a great horse, but he just was too much horse for her. So we had a partnership, and he went on to win at Sydney Royal. He placed at Nationals multiple times. He placed at Canberra, all the things. And she wanted to sell her share in him, which was fine. So when I bought him from her, the first thing I did as his now exclusive owner was I took him straight to the vets, because I had felt that he'd had a lameness in his right front. And so everyone kept saying to me, he's winning so much. Like, he just literally won 2 Supremes the weeks before he went to the uni to be checked. And they're like, just keep going. You're winning. Why would you stop? Why would you get diagnostics? I was like, I just know this horse is not happy. Like, I'd be out in the bush trotting along, and he would just slow down for no reason. Like, he didn't want to continue trotting. We're having a good time, and then he just checks out. And things were just odd to me. So the first thing I did was I took him to the uni when I'd spent a lot of money on buying him, and took him to the uni, and they diagnosed an issue in his knee. And he straight away went on to holidays and had quite a long spell and shockwave and things to rehabilitate that injury, but he still was very convincingly winning in competitions. Yeah.
Can we just circle back? In terms of him getting diagnosed with ECVM, what was his diagnosis when you found out about the ECVM, and who helped you diagnose it?
So I went to a dissection with Sharon May Davies, and the horse that we were dissecting was not an ECVM horse, but there was a lot of talk about ECVM and her findings, and I actually went along with a very good friend of mine who happened to be Bronson's chiro at the time, Jessica Wilmer, and we kept looking over at each other as she's describing symptoms and things, going, this is Bronson, they're talking about Bronson. And when I came back, my first port of call was to try and get a diagnosis for him, because in my mind he was becoming a neurological horse. He had started doing some odd neurological things that it was all fitting the profile for me, including the scrambling and the float, the not being able to canter anymore. After the dissection, we ran a few basic neurological tests, and he failed all of them in my mind. It was, we'd compare it with another horse, and the same things weren't happening. So,
what were those tests?
The moving the tail while someone was leading him, using the tail. The one that he hated the most was walking down a hill but taking away the horizon. So we didn't even have to, blindfold him or anything. It was just holding his head up above skyline, and he did that test once terribly, and was just hanging in the air, searching for the ground, heartbreaking. Yeah. We tried to repeat it, and he actually got very violent about it. When I took him for his diagnosis, he refused very emphatically to do that test again. We did repeat it one more time just before the dissection at the end, and again, just flailing, had no idea where he was in space once we took the horizon away. The next port of call was obviously to try and get someone to x-ray his neck, and this is probably, if anyone has a takeaway from this whole talk, this for me is the most important thing, because I was in the industry, I'm a vet nurse. I had been sending client horses and working with the same group of vets for a long time. They called him a frequent flyer. They had treated him all along. And when I tried to get a diagnosis, it was kind of like, that doesn't exist. We don't check for that. I actually tried to contact another university, and first off they booked me in to take the x-rays. They then called me back a couple of days later and said, we've had a meeting with a panel, we've decided that we would not like to continue with this, so we're cancelling your booking. So that was not an option. I rang another major vet hospital. They said they would not take diagnostics for ECVM. They only acknowledged that wobblers would be the only thing that they would diagnose on. So it made me feel like I've come out of being with a group of people that are, all high functioning, talking about this like it's a thing. I've seen the bones. I was convinced in my head my horse had it, but I just felt like one of those crazy people that, like, here comes one of those, lefties that come in with their crazy ideas. Yeah. And it was really disheartening. And I feel like if I wasn't in the industry, if I didn't believe in what was happening so much, I would have just given up at that point. Even when I got the testing done, they took the x-rays, but they would not comment on the x-rays. So that was referred to Christine G, who's just amazing. And finally, I was back with people that were acknowledging that I wasn't crazy. And she was the one that wrote the report for me and made all the findings. The x-rays weren't perfect, but they were good enough that we could tell that the horse absolutely had ECVM, that he was unilateral, and that there was, my memory is that he had a spinal cord impingement, which for me was an absolute game over, because you cannot continue a performance horse comfortably if they have a spinal cord impingement.
It's a really difficult area, and I know that I've presented to people on ECVM before, and I effectively got shut down as well in a professional place, where they just refused to acknowledge its existence and the potential implications from a clinical aspect. And I'd been in so many dissections, heard so many stories about these horses, and then just it was kind of disregarded as a diagnosis, and that's when I kind of really stopped talking about it, because there was no support around me in that space. So I can only understand, as I'm not as an owner trying to find answers. I was just trying to help my clients, but it's very frustrating as an owner when or you think, no, this fits my horse, and then you can't get an answer for that. So I think it's changing. I think there are more vets now who, even if they don't believe that it has a clinical implication, are more willing to take the x-rays. And, for some horses, they can go for a fair few years and not show obvious clinical signs, but it depends what you're looking at, because what you've described in the early days, before Bronson showed neurological challenges, like you described just weird, behaviours and, interesting, like you described it as behavioural quirks and things like that. So what vets are looking for is when they decompensate from a neurological perspective, which didn't occur obviously until he was 10. But if we can recognise this earlier and start to help the horses in a more positive way, like it doesn't have to be a death sentence, and maybe they're not clinical at that point, but you're just noticing some of these smaller signs, then you can be more aware of when it does start to decompensate and when you need to make a decision, as you found that you got to that point where it was enough. So how did you help him? Because I know you've had a lot of experience with rehab, and so what do you think were the things that really helped Bronson to support him on that journey? And because I was at the dissection, I saw his body, like he still looked amazing at that point. Even I didn't see him when he was still alive, but even just looking at him after that point, he's the balance of his body and his muscle development and all that still looked amazing.
I think if I wanted to show him, I absolutely could have shown that horse the day I took him. And when I'd have clinics, I would say to people, if you saw this horse, would you buy this horse? And they're absolutely, he was the dream horse. He was just absolutely spectacular. He's, like you say, his muscle structure stayed, like what I did actually lasted, even when he was retired. But I think I'm big into really good farrier care. And one of the most important things I did for that horse was I had been working in the Hunter Valley, had my daughter and moved back home. But when I started to have problems, I had a great resource in his farriers in the Hunter Valley were Link Bowman and Jeff Hall, and they changed his life, like keeping that balance from the ground up. So every 5 weeks for 5 years, to keep him a competition horse, I floated him 6 hours to the Hunter Valley, and they would do his feet.
Hospital
and then
training right there on the float.
Yeah. So that's why, the scrambling on the float was odd, because we had spent a lot of years. But that was when they would shoe him, it felt like he had springs on his feet. And if I tried every farrier in the area, I promise you, and he just used to smash into the ground. He didn't have that bounce back effect. But I think they had his angles so correct that he went for a lot longer. If you can't keep them sound on their feet, you can't compete them right. But those guys kept him sound. They were amazing. But in the beginnings, like, he was a very, very difficult horse to treat his feet at all. Like, they will never forget the hell that he gave them to be able to be underneath him, even doing his feet. But credit to them, they persisted, and he ended up, the final report from his current farrier, Andrew, he said, I can feel this horse has a lot of restriction and tightness, and he said he's very well behaved, but I sometimes wish he wasn't. Like, I wish he would stand up for himself, because he must be so sore to be letting me do his feet at this, end stages. So the boys in the Hunter definitely, built confidence with him, set boundaries, because Bronson was all about boundaries. And they did a great job. But yeah, they were fantastic. And like you say, standing in the float in good posture. I kept saying to Sharon over the course of dissection, I just couldn't get my head around, he was the best postural feeder I have ever experienced. Like, every single day I would pretty much take a photo of him, just going like, how does this horse do this? He was just so perfect in his posture, dead square. He'd have his tummy up, he'd have his neck in that beautiful position. He was an amazing postural feeder, and right till the very, very end, that never tapered off. But I'm not sure. I know Sharon did find a muscle in his neck that she said would be Olympic selection style muscle if she was looking, that helps him to have that colty style upright appearance.
Yeah,
that was
Mr. Malice.
Yeah.
When did you do postural feeding? Like, when did you start that? A long time ago, like. Because obviously you noticed that
I started that when I met Sharon, essentially at that first dissection. That was when I really learned a lot about the postural feeding.
How many years ago was that?
I don't know when we were at that dissection. Maybe, probably 4, because it was just before he was retired. So he was 11, and so I'd say about 4 years ago. Yeah, but in general, he always had that sort of posture anyway. But it just was more evident when we were doing structured postural feeding. But I guess in his work, what I learnt from him always being injured was I really enjoyed the rehab programs that they would give me with, the increasing walking for 20 minutes a day, then increase 5 minutes trotting. And it was very structured. And I started to think, why are we only doing this with rehab horses? Like, why are we getting on other horses that are not rehab, and within 5 minutes people are trotting and cantering? Like, if it's good enough for rehab horses and it's helping them get stronger when they've got compromise, why are we not doing this for our ridden performance horses? And now I've really stuck to that rehab program as far as allowing them that 20 minutes time to warm up before starting work, which still might look like lateral work and things like that, or, going over poles. But I watch people they just can't wait to get into that trotting and cantering. For me, that's just taking from the bank, right? Like, there's no deposits in the bank. You're just taking money out every time you ride the horse. Yeah, so I guess he became a horse that just lived in a rehab program, and I think that kept him stronger for longer.
Definitely. So what did he feel like to ride then for you? Because I know you've said, he's had some wobbly moments, but then right up until the end, he looked like the kind of horse that you could have taken out to a show. And there's obviously a lot going on. What was it like to ride? And also, did you have good days and poor days like some ECVM horses did have? And what could you see were influencing factors for those?
Yeah, he he felt, when he was younger, I knew he was a fancy horse and I liked the way that he looked, but he felt like driving a tractor. Like when you were sitting up there, it felt rough underneath you. Like there was something wrong with the way, not wrong, but odd with the way that he would hit the ground. And in retrospect, I look and see that beautiful hanging, floating movement, which is probably why we're breeding to these stallions that carry ECVM, it looks spectacular, but it was actually him for a moment going, where's the ground? Oh, there it is. And that little, oh, there it is, felt like a little bit of a clunk underneath you, like you were hanging and then you weren't hanging. So whilst I was getting really great feedback about how beautiful it looked, he was not the most comfortable horse to ride. Like there was a disconnect between what I was feeling and what they were seeing. But I guess he got stronger, and then that feeling wasn't as much. When I first got him, going down hills was a huge challenge. Like he just would look at the hill, and it wasn't that he didn't want to go down it, he just didn't know where to start. Like, what do I do first to get down this hill? And I remember taking him out with my dad on a trail ride and saying to him, Dad, he actually just can't go down this hill. I'm going to have to get off him. And even leading him downhill, like you couldn't be in front of him because he would build a little bit of speed and come down like a tractor. So things like that were odd. He had an amazingly strong startle reflex, so that made riding challenging. He was exceptionally noise sensitive. So I remember one show, I knew that I'd won a big award, and the last horse was working out. So I thought, I'll just reach down and I'll take the earplugs out because I just don't like the look of them. You know, I'd rather not have them in. Standing there, absolutely happy as Larry, just done an amazing workout. He's in first place. I reached down to take the earplugs out, and it was like someone had turned the volume up to 1,000. Like he leapt in the air, he reared up. Luckily, I reached down and shoved the earplug back in. Amazing. But it was like he was terrified in a second when that sound returned. So even if I'd forget and leave the float, the first speaker I'd go near, he would be like beside himself, up on his back legs, terrified because of the sound. So I managed him most of the time with a hides hood at home, and that really helped him. He really loved his hides hood, but definitely earplugs at shows. But yeah, if there was a noise stimulus, like he would often buck or spin so hard that my thighs would be black from hanging on. So I was lucky. Like I was poor. We were poor growing up. We didn't have good horses. I had to, if I wanted to ride, I had to turn into something. So I learnt to be really sticky. But I don't believe a normal person. Well, a lot of normal people have said to me, I would never get on that horse. That's crazy. But you know, when you've had to ride cheap horses and make them good horses your whole life, you learn to hang on. So, but often he would bruise my legs from the panels on the fender, essentially, smacking into my thighs so hard as I was hanging on, and he was headed in another direction.
Yeah, and for any less experienced rider, you know, that's a red flag. Like that, if a horse is reacting like that, then majority of people wouldn't be able to ride it, and that's when you're putting yourself in significant danger if you've got a horse like that.
Yeah, gravity got me often. I fell off, gravity got me, but sometimes I wish it had of because it might have hurt less than hanging on.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about that, you mentioned a few times that you would take him out on trails and things, so you obviously had a bit of variation in his work. Do you think that was a beneficial part of, you know, him continuing to be able to work?
Yeah, absolutely. And he loved the beach. His favourite thing of all was to go to the beach, and he loved to go for a run down the beach. So I guess a bit of cross-training in that sense, that he would be where I would take him in the bush. It was quite hilly. He's, you know, picking through rocky terrain and things like that.
Without having to think about it, like he's just doing it.
Yeah, and He went to the beach a lot. He used to happily wade the whole length of the beach in the water. He would swim to New Zealand if I let him. Like, he loved swimming. So I used that a lot as therapy for his legs, just walking in the water. And he was completely unfazed. I'd lead young horses off him for that job and all that sort of stuff. He was, yeah. So he had a wide range of things that he did. He actually, oddly enough, loved jumping and was a very good jumper, even cross country. In the end, I couldn't do that with him. Obviously, once he'd had a few injuries, that it was best not to jump, but that was one of his favourite things to do, which makes no logical sense to me. But he
and how did he feel jumping? Like, from your perspective, did he feel like, how did he feel?
Fantastic. Yep. Yeah. I'm not a jumper, but I felt very safe and had a desire to jump more with him. Jumping is definitely not my thing normally, but I enjoy a horse that will pop over a jump, and yeah, he was lovely to jump.
When you were jumping him, in terms of his head position, was he in a flexed position, or was he more in a neutral position of, where he would choose to be, kind of thing?
Yeah, so he was neutral, and that was one of the things retrospectively after his diagnosis. Knowing your horse has a spinal cord impingement, you would put the head in, and I did ride him a couple of times just casually after his dissection. He was a great lead horse for the young breakers, so I would lead them off the side and lay over them and stand up on their saddles and all that sort of thing. So I did use him for that job. And he took a couple of people on their first trail ride walking. And after the fact, when he would get stressed, where normally I would hang on because I know something was coming, I would actually give him the reins and just verbally reassure him, like, you're right, mate, it's okay. And he would diffuse the situation and calm himself back down. But in his heyday, I would have had to be a crazy person to give the reins when I thought he was going to explode. But in my head, I knew that the trigger was the shortening of the neck. So I figured out I was safer to give him a bit of rein, and it actually did work quite well. So probably when he was jumping. And same, he did camp drafting. And when he camp drafted, his head was out where it wanted to be. So if his neck was outstretched, he could really get after a cow, because he had the arrogance and the aggression to really enjoy pushing cows around, and that was full galloping, and I did not feel unsafe. So it's a funny little thing that.
And I really do wonder when the flexion, I think, creates a lot of problems for these horses. And then especially when they don't have a neutral strength themselves, so if they are let go, they go into a hollow posture. That's probably has just as negative effect potentially on them. But when they've established, and because also with your feeding positions, him having that nice feeding posture, as well as trails, and letting him find a neutral head position where he had still good posture, I think that's a big part of it. Like, in terms of some of the horses that I know who've decompensated, they've been in highly flexed environments, for different reasons. So whether they're going up the levels in dressage, or they're being pushed by a coach to create more push and pull, and there's more flexion in the neck with often not the support in the flexion, so they're flexing but they're not supporting and carrying. And
he went to medium level dressage. He competed very successful medium level dressage, and I remember sometimes I'd have lessons and the coach would be saying, rip his head off, he's got to come in deeper, bring his head down, because it was a beautiful position, but it wasn't probably as through as a dressage person would like. And I used to just think to myself, I don't want to get up every day and just like pull and yank and rip, and he doesn't want me to catch him to do that. So I was like, actually, I'm just not going to do that. Like, if I have to sacrifice a few marks, and he was still getting 69%, like in one of his last tests he was scoring 69%, but I was like, it's not a deal that I'm prepared to do with the devil to get the scores up. He physically I believed he couldn't put his head where they wanted him to. But I wonder what that would have looked like if he was in a home that continued to, maybe use draw reins or things like that that he didn't experience with me. What does that look like if you back a horse into a corner so much that something's got to give?
Especially a horse with that level of arrogance. Like if he, has that bit of fight about him anyway. Like some horses will just go into learned helplessness, but there's either the point at which the horse itself has a strong mind and they won't tolerate it, or the other option is that they can't control the pain and the nerve impingement happens, and then they have these unpredictable, explosive behaviours because, I don't know, anyone who's experienced unpredictable nerve pain, like there ain't no hiding that, that there isn't, you can't get away from it, and it's unpredictable and really scary. I've seen horses where they've had that happen, and afterwards they look exactly what you described after you open the float that time, and they look frightened and scared because they're like, what the hell just happened in my body? I was not in control of that. And that's the horses that then become dangerous, take off, do crazy things that seem unpredictable. But if you have a nerve pain or impingement, then you're not thinking in that moment.
Yeah.
What do you think he's taught you about listening to and advocating for horses then? I mean, like you just said, it's quite it's advocacy to say, I'm putting him above my scores, or knowing him for enough years to say, I actually know that this is better for him. It's not just that we don't need to keep working to that point, but I really need to prioritise his well-being. Or what would you even say to another owner who just received an ECVM diagnosis? There's obviously a lot of emotional, financial, different things that come up with the whole condition. Yeah,
and I think it doesn't have to be a death sentence. Like, he was a grade 4, so he was as bad as it gets. And I honestly believe with the right support, if he didn't have his impingement, I could have kept him going. Like, he had... I remember in the dissection, like his skeleton in especially in the back end and things didn't reflect what we were finding muscularly, because he had such a good strong posture that he wasn't taking from the bones, if that makes sense. So he wasn't like wearing in joints in ways that a horse that was going hollow backed and having all these issues would go. So I love that we live in a time where it's now becoming cool to learn more about holistically managing your horse. We're not the weirdos anymore. We're becoming the people that people want to aspire to be like. And that's like a super cool time to be alive, that people want to listen to these podcasts and learn and go, what can I do to help my horse? I have grown up in a super conservative stock horse background, and that's hard to be with people that are open-minded and then go and be the little fish that everyone says you're doing it wrong. You need to make this horse. I wish I had 30 minutes of this horse. I could get it to go so much better. All the things. That's really difficult for me to be respected in one area of my life, and in my happy place go and be told that I need to push harder, and I'm essentially, the horse would be better off without me. It'd win more, it'd do more. So that's what I'd like to, don't worry about what everyone else is saying, because essentially, like, I work for my horse. I don't, you're not paying for any real estate in my head. You're not paying his vet bills. And people used to say to me, why would you travel to the Hunter Valley every 5 weeks? Like, you're wasting your money. I say, I don't ask you to pay for the fuel. I don't ask you to tow your float up there. Like, this is a me decision, and I'm happy with it. So I don't need your outside influence telling me that I'm an idiot, because surely there's a farrier closer to home that can manage my horses. So I guess you just have to surround yourself with the right people, like a support system that when you're having those days of maybe, I'm going crazy. And at the end of the dissection, I had a huge moment to just go, all these years, everyone's telling me I'm crazy and I shouldn't have retired him, and he's fine and he's this, and, even when what I would consider a fail at the final x-ray day in a neurological test, and they're saying, well, that could be a coincidence. He just coincidentally put his foot in, crossed it over. And, and I'm like, am I just going mad here? So if you surround yourself with the Raquels and the Sophies of this world, the animals are much happier. So I think it's choosing, and, you know, going to coaches that are saying things that when you're coming home, you're feeling like crap. You're not coming home on a high going, that was awesome, I was happy, my horse was happy. Like, go with what makes you feel happy, because chances are it makes your horses feel happy. And there just are no shortcuts. Like, I see all the gadgets out in the field. I see the harsher bits. I see the justifications why side reins are actually helping my horse, and, you know, some rope over its wither that goes between its front legs is helping it relax and all that sort of stuff. Like, if in your gut you go, I wouldn't like that if that was me and I was like tied up like that, so I'm not going to do it to my horses. But I think, like, choosing your community is super, super important. And now we are becoming the majority, and it's happening. And in the next 10 years, this whole space is going to look so different for horses, especially ECVM horses, because how can you have a disease that 40% of stock horses, thoroughbreds, warm bloods have, and even with professionals, I mention it, no one's ever heard of it? Like, how is that? That's what frustrates me the most, that if it was 40% and it was contagious to humans, we would all know about it.
We would be screaming, so,
yeah, how do we have those numbers, which are now, you know, indisputable? They are real, they exist, and people have never heard of it. So that's what I want to get out of Bronson's legacy, is to tell other people that this is a thing. We don't have to be scared of it, but we need to make choices and manage our horses a little differently, and maybe adjust the goalposts for those horses. Yeah.
Wise words.
Yeah, I think that's all extremely valuable for people to hear. And, like, we are, the community has changed a lot in even the last few years. Like, even I mean, maybe I track these clients as well, but, you know, I never used to have as many people coming to me and saying, like, I just want to do the best for my horse, and I just want to understand, you know, my horse, and I also want to keep my horse for their lifetime as well. And so, you know, I feel like we have made a big shift, and we're continuing to make that shift, and there is still a whole big, you know, realm of people who are not there, and you know, but I think there's more people infiltrating both areas that are asking questions and creating awareness, and so I think.
Yeah, I remember the first time I took him to the uni, and I was meeting the professor for the first time, and he said to me, Kate, what do you want out of this? And I said, you know, honestly, I want this horse. This is when he had his sore knee, so I just bought him, spent a lot of money. I said, I want this horse in 10 years' time. That's what I want.
Yeah.
And he just stopped and he looked at me, and I never forget the look on his face, because I didn't expect it. He said, you know what? All the years I've been here and I've been a professor, he said, no one has ever said that to me. There's always a show. There's always, a competition, a clinic, or something. There's something the human wants from the horse, and that's where their rehab is focused around, that they want it ready for that. He said, not one person has ever said to me, I care about what my horse is doing in 10 years' time. And that really stuck with me, because, people can get really caught up on the next goal, and that's not horse-based.
Yeah, and I feel very privileged to have a lot of clients now that their focus is their individual horse. You know, we've had a lot of people now come through their functional posture course, and they're not there to get to the next competition or to get their horse ready for to reach a particular goal. Like, they're there for optimizing the health and function and longevity of their horses, and to learn and educate themselves so they can help them even more. And I mean, that's why we do this, so that, you know, we can support what used to be a very small minority that is now a growing community of people. So
yeah, I had a phone call the other day from my friend Simon Fielder. He was at the dissection, and we run clinics together, and he's a trainer. And he rang me, and he was so excited because he said, you know what, I'm in Queensland. He said, I just got news back about Bronson's story. And when the people said, do you know anything about ECVM? He said, I was actually there. But he said, how cool is that? Like, that this happened in New South Wales and it just went to Queensland. And he's like, the web is getting wider. Like, we're getting to people. We are the message is getting around. People are going to find out about ECVM, and it's happening. So I mean, it always helps to have a good-looking poster boy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Bronson, he's that horse we all dream of, and it's more hits home more when you see the dream horse that can have all these restrictions. It's not just, a scrawny, skinny thoroughbred put out in a paddock that no one really took notice of. It's a horse we'd all love to own one day.
Yeah, and I think that's another important point, is that just because they have ECVM does not mean that they haven't achieved things or can't achieve things in their life, because I'm sure there's many winning competitive horses out there that have been ECVM, whether they're race horses, dressage horses, eventers, show jumpers, whatever. It's just being aware of what you're riding and being aware of how we can support them better, and being aware of when they start to show signs that they're not coping, and so that we can keep the horse and the rider as safe as possible. So is there anything that you would like to add, Kate, as a takeaway or finishing off comments?
Essentially, I think we probably all need to help thank Sharon for all of her work, because this is her baby. And if it wasn't for her, I would be the person that knew nothing about it. And if, my respected vets told me it was a load of rubbish, I probably would have believed them. So, I'm really grateful to Sharon, and she was so supportive through the whole process, and she does not treat those horses like anything less than her own prized possession. And a lot of people whose first dissection his was commented on me on how respectful and how kind she was to the horse, even when it was no longer breathing. But that was just, for me, that was the dream team, because the venue was amazing. He was very happy and relaxed in his final moments, and Sharon has put aside essentially her life to make this, to get it out there. So I feel like it's the least we can do to try to share the word after she's put in so much legwork.
Yeah, and she's actually weathered so many threats, in relation to this, and she just keeps going, and what she's kind of been through to still continue to help educate people and create awareness around this is a lot of personal struggles, with that as well, kind of dealing with some of the negative things that people can say. So she's definitely, she's been a massive influence in my life. So and I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how we drop the numbers. I'm not sure, but I think just giving some horses a bit of a voice is the first step to go. I've had so many people contact me since we shared Bronson's story saying, "Oh my God, Kate, I think my horse has that." Even my farrier, he said, when I had a mare and she had a weird looking neck, and when I would bend her neck to the left, sometimes she would fall over. And that happened a few times with people saying, they just do this weird thing and they would collapse or whatever, which, was most likely a restriction of that blood flow through the, in his case, the vein was seriously compromised. People putting the dots together going, I think I've actually seen this. And like I said to Simon the other day, if 40% have it, we're riding it every week as trainers. We are sitting on ECVM horses. There's no way we're dodging them. 40% is way too high odds. Every single week we're riding them, and we want to go home to our families at the end of the day and stay safe as well. So we just need to learn better how to manage them and know when the call it point is. When it's no longer. Bronson did have, so you mentioned the spinal cord impingement, but it was unilateral, so he was missing the transverse process on one side, and then he also had his vertebral artery was taking a different course and going through C7, and it had quite a different position on the side of the missing transverse process, and it also was affecting his longus coli attachment too. So, there's a lot of structures that are affected, especially when you're getting up to grade 4 ECVM. So it's understanding what's happening from that anatomical perspective, and then pairing that with the functional, and then the support system that we put in place with the horse. So did you have just a few takeaways to finish off with?
Yeah, I think, obviously there's variation amongst horses, but you've pointed out a few things that have come up for Bronson, but we've also heard before for other horses, behavioural quirks. I feel like that term, or a variation of that term, like behaviour, quirks, personal little things that come up. You've described aggression, bolting from the show arena. I think one thing that you mentioned that I find very interesting, difficulty with cohesion in herds. Horses pick up on how other horses are behaving. So, I know some horses that don't fit into the herd. They have ECVM, and they're more of a rejected horse from the group. Or in Bronson's case, he's been very aggressive towards other horses. So there's a lot happening there. And then there's so many things going on that you've pulled together from ulcer problems that never could be cured from treatment, and probably pain-based, and the grooming, the hosing and the rugging. I mean, the needle changes that you've described, that really blow my mind, actually, how profound it is to be able to be needled across your body and have so little awareness and yet be very sensitive on the limbs. So, they're really interesting changes, and that people can either look for in their own horses or be aware of small things, and just realizing that the small things, like whether your horse is very sensitive somewhere and not sensitive somewhere else, are relevant when you're thinking about whether the horse is comfortable or if they have something else going on. I definitely also think your comments about awareness in the industry are valuable, and being open-minded, curious, and not judgmental, because people find it easier to change and accept new information when we are kind and open and welcoming and less judgmental, because it means that there are safe spaces to come to and find out more information. And even if you were wrong, even if you found out your horse didn't have ECVM,
yeah,
it's worth checking, and it's wonderful to have places to go to and support networks to have to discover whether it's relevant for your horse or not. So, and thank you to you as well. I mean, it's not a small feat to come out and be open about dealing with the issues, and being honest about the second guessing that you've had about, am I going crazy? Am I not going crazy? This was a big investment. I've chosen to let him go when other people have given me a lot of judgment. So, hats off to you for making different sacrifices and hard decisions.
And yeah, it's Sharon did ask me the other day. She said, "Have you had any negative backlash since doing this?" And to be honest, I haven't. My inbox has been flooded with people asking me for more information, and that's why this is important to me, because I can't have this conversation 80 times over. So it's easy again. I'm going to direct them to your podcast, and I save all the talking time. But people really do want to learn more. There just was not the information out there. So, yeah, it was no way I was going to let him go to the grave and not make a difference, because I think he is different to a lot of other horses, and he had a profile and he's done some amazing things, and he deserves to, have a bit of a legacy, as far as he struggled, but he still thrived despite his struggles, because he didn't know a different body. He never had a good one.
No, exactly.
So
it's
to him,
right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Kate, for coming on and sharing the story. It's never easy to relive everything over and over again, but I would ask that people listening to this episode do share it far and wide, and just help those people who are not sure, they're stuck, they've tried to find the answers, they haven't been able to find the answers, and if this can influence and help one other person, then that's taking Bronson's legacy even further. So thank you so much for sharing the story with us. And it was a pleasure to be in his dissection and see, the inside of all of the stories that he had given you. So, yeah, can't say thank you enough for coming on as a guest.
No, thank you. And please keep making more podcasts. Keep coming up with new subjects. Keep doing what you do, because you are making a difference. You absolutely are.
Thank you. I think we're nearly up to 100 episodes. So
yeah, you might be. Yeah.
You're probably up near that. So, yeah, thank you. And thanks for always sharing our podcast. So thanks for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, Kate Schreiber and Sophie Vandenberg today in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please keep an eye out for the next Equine Functional Posture course and subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes. You can also find links to our socials in the comments, and just share this podcast and give us a 5-star rating so that we can just keep getting more information out there.
And we'll see you in the next exciting episode.
Thank you.